Episode 38 of Politically Conscious returns Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Trump's D.C. police takeover. Shelley Winter says yes. Critics cry racism in 2028 power play. Texas Democrats flee to stop losing 5 seats. Did they just abandon flood victims? And over 300,000 black women out of work under this administration. All right, y'all. If you know about the Politically Conscious show, I didn't actually mean to have an intro. I just wanted to do a quick live here. I got a training to go to in 20 minutes, so hopefully I can get my thoughts out in a very quick time here. This is labeled "White Supremacy Is A Lie." So again, forgive me for that intro, but I wanted to break that down. I've been having some dialogue with one of my good friends, and I wanted to just share some of my thoughts in reference to that statement. I've been making that statement for a number of years. White supremacy is a lie. And so I want to break that down and just give some more details because I think it will serve us, or I think that it can serve our community well to understand that actual statement. White supremacy is a lie. White supremacy not only is a lie, it's always been a lie, because there's never been a time that any group is superior to another, despite the various points in history in which one group has oppressed another for whatever reason, but particularly here in America, race is the construct that is the backbone of this country. And so when I say white supremacy is a lie, it's not me denying the construct of white supremacy that is still at play, still factoring into a lot of things we're seeing right now, currently, even politically currently. So just to be clear, I am factually stating white supremacy is a lie, because at no point has white people been superior to black people or any other ethnic or racial group. Again, any group has ever considered themselves superior. Superiority in itself, from a human standpoint, is a lie, right? But the reason that I'm doing this commentary today, if you will, is to peel back the realities of how white supremacy is a lie, and how not understanding that for a lot of people in our community, or people who have never heard that statement, white supremacy is a lie, how not hearing that, or not like hearing it factually stated in that manner, how you will take the construct of white supremacy and the oppression that has been intentional in this country and respond to it as if it is real. So if you don't know that white supremacy is a lie, not simply because I say white people are not ever been superior, let's get into some history. So we know, again, that the oppression of black people, the killing of Native Americans, is how this country was founded, and white supremacy was born in order to build up this country, right? The construct of race, the construct of white supremacy was born. And even to the extent that at the turn of the 20th century, in the 1900s, early 1900s, our country even had a tax-paid office dedicated to studying African Americans inferiority, or Negroes at the time, Negro inferiority, from a basically cognitive standpoint, saying that we didn't think the same, we were not up to par there, and all these different areas in which we were not. Or there were people literally conducting quote unquote scientific studies, proving that we were an inferior race and destined for subjugation, which obviously was used, and people reworded the Bible and used it in addition to subjugate our community. So these are all real things that happen. So when I say white supremacy is a lie, it's no denying the fact of how the construct was pushed in order for the United States to become the number one GDP country in the world, and become number one in the world based off the free labor they got from enslaving Africans. Right. So there's no denying what the construct has done and what it has led to. But I am specifically stating white supremacy is a lie, because it is a fact, even scientifically, even at the time when they had the pseudo office dedicated to studying. I think that stuff was, what the heck was that stuff called? I can't even think of the name of it right now, where, again, just idea that we were inferior, and they studied it in white I forgot what they called it at the time, the study of it. A lot of people always get into what's this Margaret, the lady that was always pushing abortion or whatever. At one time, she got caught up in the movement, whatever, considering white people superior. I forgot what that was called. But anyway, let me get back to my point. So even during that time when that office existed and there were renowned scientists working to do studies to kind of prove the differences in the superiority of white people, actual science, I'm talking about the methodology of scientists, there were scientists who always knew that there was pseudoscience. That those people who already had a bias and an agenda, who literally conducted actual studies to prove our inferiority, but those actual studies would never hold up to scientific methodology. And there were actual scientists in the world who always knew that it was pseudoscience, because actual science also has proven that no race is superior to another. In there may be some cultural differences that scientifically points out, like for example, based on our ancestry, Black people are more prone to sickle cell anemia. So you have these different variants based on where different groups regionally came up historically or evolved from, that are still particular to different groups or different races or different ethnicities. So those things are realities, but simply one group's being cognitively superior to another is not a real thing. And science always knew it, despite our country being raised off the backbone of racial oppression, literally forwarding BS science, pseudoscience, to suggest that white people were superior. So now that you understand that, when I say white supremacy is a lie, that's an actual fact. Here's how it matters. It matters because for most African Americans, we've never heard it stated that way. While we understand and have, in a sense, historically have shown and proven that we're not inferior in so many ways, most African Americans have never heard the statement, white supremacy is a lie. And now that you understand that that is factually true, and hearing it that way, here's how it can make a difference in 2025. It can make a difference because due to the oppression of the past and the construct of race and the construct of white supremacy, our ancestors have, in a sense, been fighting against that construct to the extent that they almost were having to prove themselves against a false construct. And unfortunately, many African Americans are still in a state of having to prove themselves against this false construct. When in reality, when you know that white supremacy is a lie, you would never even consider answering the bell to a construct that's a falsity. Now, in society, because white supremacy, the construct, is so interwoven into American society, there is the actuality of society mistakenly or falsely looking at African Americans as inferior, because society itself does that. That is a reality that you sometimes will face. It can lead to discrimination, especially more so in the past, very overtly. Now we understand that because, again, white supremacy, the construct is interwoven into our society, then a lot of times some of that stuff is covert, but been more covert over the past 40 years. And now we're in a political atmosphere where that covert is becoming overt again, overt from the standpoint that the narrative of white supremacy, which has always been a lie, the narrative itself has been continued because it was created to enslave Africans. The psychology of creating the narrative was the type of enslavement that Africans experienced, the majority going to South America, and then those of us who are African Americans in this country coming here. The reality is humans, to a degree, were not going to be okay with enslaving other humans with the level of brutality that was a part of that type of enslavement, particularly to Africans, without seeing those humans as less than. I'm talking about the natural human condition isn't such that you will consistently treat someone as an animal if you see them as equal to you. So the construct needed to be born by those who were going to benefit financially off enslavement. They had to create a narrative and tweak the Bible to say, no, these people are set to be subjugated. The Bible says it. These are all narratives because those who wanted to benefit the most financially understood even the people that we will have assist us in this oppression need to believe that these people deserve this. So that's how the narrative got created. And so unfortunately, the narrative was constructed so well, we still live with the construct of white supremacy today, interwoven into a country founded on the construct of race. So, if you're following me, I am very much acknowledging the reality of how this false construct is a reality that still to this day, me as an African American in the wrong scenario, the construct of race, the construct of white supremacy, I could actually be killed. So I'm laying out very clearly that I understand the reality of the construct and how it is actually a part of our society. I am distinguishing the fact that scientifically white supremacy is a lie. And if you say that to your children, then here's the type of things that not connecting those two and seeing them as different. Again, the construct of white supremacy versus the fact that white supremacy is a lie is why, as I mentioned earlier, our ancestors have fought against the construct so much so that in our minds we created comments like this. I know you've heard this before. You must work 2 times as harder, or even have heard people go as far as 10 times as harder, and that is up against the false construct. That's why you would say that, because a whole society, a whole culture, the American culture had decided falsely that we were inferior. And so for a African American to have to, in a sense, prove themselves to this false supremacy, then the dominant culture or the majority culture would really say, oh, they would have to be exceptional for them to quote unquote accept them in the current society. So there is a reality to where that comment comes from. But if you put it up against the fact that white supremacy is a lie, has always been a lie, then, and especially now that our ancestors have had us interwoven and with more opportunity than they had in the past, when you understand that fact, there will be never a time, nor should we still be saying to our children that they have to work 2 times as harder. Because why would I have to work 2 times harder for someone that I'm actually equal to? You do not have to. You do not have to, and nor do you need to overstate what is necessary. And the only reason you would overstate is because subconsciously you believe you have to prove against this inferiority. That's why you have comments like, I need to work 2 times as hard or 3 times as hard. The comment comes from trying to answer to a false construct. Again, if I can move you to the reality in our community, to the reality that white supremacy is a lie, which is a fact and always has been a lie, then you now can esteem yourself to know that you doing your best is enough anywhere you go. Now let's put that into context of current society or going into a workplace. And so what happens is in current society, human nature, there is nepotism that has always been part of human nature, where there is favor to those you know, people in your lineage, people that you're akin to, or people that you give favor to because of some relationship that you might have. And so what happened is, what still happens and what always happens is me doing my best or your children doing their best. They may always, to an extent, run up against nepotism in the workforce. Let me see, I got a comment. Let me see this comment real quick. Okay, super cool. So they may still run up against nepotism in the workforce. But if you have a workplace, for example, just to give some context, a workplace of 100 people, for example, out of the 100 people in that workplace, 5, at max 10 people may have gotten favor due to some type of nepotism. But typically in a workplace, you might know, that's the CEO's son and he's moving up quicker than the rest of us. Not that it's fair. And or the son could be actually dynamic. And the reality of nepotism is you actually, some kids that are benefiting from their parent being the CEO. I'm just kind of just talking about it as objectively as possible. Sometimes they're actually very good, but people just assume nepotism because their parent is the CEO. But I'm just highlighting it as human nature to give favor to those from some type of relationship that you might have. And so in a society that unfortunately constructed white supremacy as the backbone of its society, you effectively had, in a sense, nepotism go to an entire group, access go to an entire group of white people versus black people did not have that, if you will. And so that was the construct of society. But when you understand, back to the point I'm trying to make here, that white supremacy is a lie, and we had, for example, DEI in place as a guardrail to ensure that nepotism was not rampant. That's the reality of what DEI did, despite what they told you politically. That's exactly what it did. And so I'm highlighting that because nepotism is a thing you will, in a sense, never get around. But the reality is, even if you controlled an organization of 100 people, you wouldn't provide nepotism to all 100. That's not possible, personally. And so the reason I'm explaining that is because when your child, which you raise them to do the best, be excellent in what they're doing, they may run into nepotism at this one job, but at this next job, there may not be family members that are in the position to keep them out. And so that skill set is enough for them to be A-OK. Our ancestors, let me see here. White domination is probably a more accurate term. Help me understand. Help me understand. I'm just not. I'm not understanding. White domination is. I mean, are you just saying it's an accurate term in what sense? Like I do see supremacy and domination as similar. So maybe you clearly think there's a nuanced difference in the word domination. I think you're trying to help me explain what I'm explaining. So I thank you for your help. I just think I equate them to be the same thing. So that's why I'm maybe not understanding your nuance. Maybe you can type a little more, help me understand. But either way, I'm just kind of rambling through my thoughts, just saying that we need to make sure our children hear the fact that white supremacy is a lie. All right, let's see. They've never been superior or supreme, sir. Maybe white domination is a more accurate term than supremacy. All right, I just see them as the same. So I guess I'm not quite understanding your nuance, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just not quite understanding you. But if I use domination, I think I still would be saying what I'm saying now. So I don't think it helps me clarify what I'm attempting to say. But the main thing that I really want black people to understand is make sure your child knows that white supremacy is a lie, and them being excellent is all that it takes for them to be okay in life, despite that they may run into some nepotism. Now, I will also highlight now that the guardrails of DEI have been removed, they may run into a little more oppression, because basically all that's ever happened when DEI is being removed is allowed for more nepotism for white people. And you see people who are not more qualified than you getting positions, and there's no legal ramification for them letting in their friends. We're watching it happen as we speak, now that they falsely told you that DEI was not merit-based. Legally, it had to be, but that's a whole nother conversation. And you can go look at some of my old videos explaining the rules and legalities of DEI and how the merit-based got turned around by this administration. So I don't want to bore you with that conversation again, but I'm just highlighting that, yeah, you may run into a little more nepotism, but you don't have to work 2 times harder or 3 times harder than somebody that you're already equal to and scientifically have always been, despite the false narratives of the past. And so make sure that you are equipping your child with the first base knowledge of the fact that white supremacy is a lie, it is not true, and that they are enough. That level of esteem will help them navigate society of things that they still may run into, which is nepotism. But if you are traumatized by, quote unquote, the narrative of white supremacy, you will think you see it everywhere and feel like you have to overcompensate psychologically. And that overcompensation is actually a recognition of the thing you're fighting against. You do not want to over identify or recognize white supremacy for what it is not. While it is a real narrative that can still have life or death consequences, you must not recognize it for anything more than the false narrative that it is. And when you understand that, you have a better response, and you don't teach your children you must be 2 times better. Because saying that, you're actually acknowledging that the only way that you can be equal or considered equal by these people, because you're answering to these people because you think you must go to them for something, like that's what you're creating subconsciously by even saying statements like that. So just know that white supremacy is a lie. I got to get to my training, but I just wanted to give those thoughts. I hope I made some of this make sense. I try to give context and perspective as a mental activist, or AKA Black Socrates. So that's all I got today. Hope some of it makes sense. Thank you for your comments, Vaughn. If any of this makes sense, or anybody you think need it, the main thing is make sure you teach your babies white supremacy is a lie. They are enough. That's the psychology that we have to have in 2025. Thankful to our ancestors, we get to have these type of dialogues versus what they were physically faced with in the past, and having to live with much more danger than we have to live. Like sometimes we make the mistake, because of the white supremacy narrative, we make the mistake of saying nothing has changed, and things have changed. Not simply saying things are better. White supremacy, the construct, is something that we still must fight. I'm still willing to be in the fight, but I'm willing to be in the fight with the reality, knowing that I am enough, knowing that anytime, I wish we would have fought better against how they misused DEI. Again, just guardrails. It didn't give us an advantage as African Americans. White people are so used to the privilege of nepotism from a social construct, from a white supremacy standpoint, that when they just simply have to compete, they don't know how to do it. So they got rid of it, not because it was not merit-based. They got rid of it because they want to get in without merit. That's what they've done for the majority of the time they've been here, and they didn't like that they had to compete on an even playing field with someone who is just like them. Hope that makes sense. I'm out of this thing. Just my 3 cents. All I ask is that you think.